All right. So, like I said, this is for the traffic calming program from McAlpine Avenue and Richmond Drive. So we're going to start with just what is traffic calming. Um, the neighborhood street traffic calming program focuses on residential streets, and we focus on adding physical solutions that encourage lower speeds over significant lengths. And it really is about speed reduction and slowing down the vehicles that do travel on these neighborhood streets. Um, really trying to make it safe for all the users of the streets. We're not trying to, slow down a highway. We're trying to slow down neighborhood residential streets, really making it safe for everybody that's going to be using it. Multimodal users, sidewalks, bikeways, people that are using those facilities as well. And we do this through the 3 E's. The first E is education. That is something like this right now, where we bring education to drivers about why high speeds are dangerous for those other users and for the drivers themselves. The next E is enforcement. That's our great partners with the Metro Nashville Police Department. They handle the enforcement side of it. And then the third E, which is near and dear to my heart as a traffic engineer, is the engineering side of traffic calming. And that is really what we're focusing on with this program. The other two E's are very important, but this is kind of the focus of the neighborhood street traffic calming program through NDOT. And the reason we're doing it is for safety. This is part of our Vision Zero initiative. So if we have a pedestrian that does get struck by a vehicle and the vehicle is traveling at 45 miles an hour, that pedestrian only has a 35% chance of survival. Whereas if that same pedestrian was struck at 25 miles per hour, they have an 89% chance of survival. So the chances of injury and a fatality is a lot less at a lower, safer speed. And that's really the goal of the program, is to make sure everybody can use these neighborhood streets in a safe manner. This is a very high demand program. As our council member spoke to earlier, we've had a lot of applications, over 500 applications for different streets across Davidson County. And we were able to select 85 streets in this last selection cycle, which is more than normal and has been very great to be able to, bring all these streets down to a safer speed for all these users. And if you do have any questions or anything outside of the traffic calming program, there is Hub Nashville, which is a great resource. You can get to it at hub.Nashville.gov. There is an app for Hub Nashville, or you can also call 311. I personally have used it to repair sidewalk on my local street. It's a great resource for anything that is outside the neighborhood street traffic calming program. So the way these streets were selected from all those applications to these 85 streets is through a matrix of 5 criteria. The main criteria is vehicular speeds. We look at the 85th percentile speeds and compare that to that 25 mile per hour mark. That makes up 45% of our prioritization matrix. The next biggest one is volume, so it's how many cars are going on the street per day. And the other 3 are vulnerable users, injury fatalities, non-driver accommodations like lack of sidewalk, and then trip destinations such as churches, schools, things that people would want to walk to. So the first street that we're going to go over is McAlpine Avenue from Gallatin Pike to McGavick Pike. So it was selected because it has an 85th percentile speed of 40 miles an hour, which is very high for a neighborhood street, has a volume of 1,126 vehicles a day, and it's a street width of about 21 to 23, so not super wide, but it does allow for cars to feel are pretty comfortable to go at that 40 mile per hour. And then the second street is Richmond Drive from Gallatin Pike to Lovewood Drive. This 85th percentile speed is 36 miles per hour and with a volume of around 941 vehicles a day. And this roughly the same street width, that 21 to 23 feet across. So I'm showing a map right now of McAlpine Avenue, and it's highlighted in yellow. I know some of you are on the phone, you're not going to be able to see it, but for the ones that are able to view it, there's a map showing the street limits that we're looking at for McAlpine Avenue. And then here is a map of Richmond Drive. Once again, it's the one highlighted in yellow. You can see the other ones, the green and the purple, are other streets that have either been applied for or selected as part of the program. So the way we can implement these measures is by taking tools out of our toolkit. So we'll go through kind of the tools that we have at our disposal currently, and then we can go into the actual tools that we're implementing on these streets. So the program toolkit really starts with speed cushions. They're modularized rubber devices. They have a reduced impact to emergency response vehicles because they do have gaps in them. So they're the individual cushions you place kind of in the lanes that do have around a 2 to 4 foot gap between the two cushions. They're 3 inches high, they're 6 feet wide, and we can vary the lengths between 7 to 14 feet, trying to get a nice smooth ride for everybody to go at a safe speed. And that's really the bread and butter of the program. They're proven to work, and they're great resources for the program. One thing that's very similar to the cushions is the speed tables. We do use these on occasion. They're also modular rubber devices. They do extend the entire width across. They don't have the gaps like the speed cushions do. Same height at 3 inches, and the width can vary based on the roadway. And those are 14 feet long. And the good thing about these two vertical measures is they do work. We did a speed study on 6 streets where we installed them before and after. And the before speed on average for those streets was 30 miles an hour on average, 31 miles an hour on average, and then 22 miles per hour afterwards. And the 85th percentile speed on those streets was 37. And we were able to get that 85th percentile speed down to 25. So that means 85% of the cars riding on the street going over these cushions were at 25 miles per hour or under, which is where we want. I mean, that's what we want to see. Other tools we have in our toolbox, radar feedback signs. Those are the signs that give you the feedback of your speed connected to a speed limit sign. We found that those on average reduce speeds around 6 miles per hour. And for the 85th, they reduce it around 7 miles per hour. Those are typically used in curves, on hills, things like that, where we can't use cushions. We can use these instead and still get some benefit trying to reduce those speeds. Another thing we can do is narrowing of the roadway through pavement markings. Typically, those white edge lines are what we like to use because it makes the driver feel a little bit less comfortable going at a high speed when they've got that edge line they're trying to stay between. It takes away a little bit of the pavement that they're able to use and still feel comfortable staying in the lane. So that white edge line is pretty good at narrowing the driver's eye. Another thing very similar to that is the bulb outs and chicanes. Bulb outs are typically used at intersections where we stripe out the excess pavement to make cars turn at a sharper turn, to turn at a sharper turn, you have to slow down. And then chicanes are typically used in conjunction with on-street parking, where we put on-street parking on one side and have the vehicles divert horizontally to the other side, and then put on-street parking back on that side to have them deflect horizontally to the other side. So they're deflecting, and to do that, you have to go at a slower speed. So those are two other tools that we have in our toolbox. Those are typically used for wider streets, trying to get rid of that excess pavement. Another thing we have to get rid of excess pavement is the traffic circles. We typically use those, or these are used in intersections, typically wider intersections, where we put a traffic circle in the middle, which adds some horizontal deflection for cars so they can't just blow through the intersection. They do have to slow down and go around the circle. So getting into the actual concept for these two streets, we'll start out with McAlpine Avenue. So this is the first section of McAlpine Avenue. From Kennedy Ave to Gallatin Pike. We're looking at 6 sets of cushions for this stretch. And then the second stretch from Kennedy Ave to McGavick Pike has got another 5 sets of cushions. Those are spaced at around 500 feet, a little bit less than that. That's really the sweet spot for cushions to allow cars to get over them, still go at a smooth pace, but not too big between them that you're able to accelerate and get up to an unsafe speed, but also not close enough where you're just constantly bouncing over them. So that's kind of the sweet spot, and why we came to that number is that spacing. So looking at Richmond Drive's a lot shorter. It's roughly half the length of McAlpine Avenue. So we have 5 sets of cushions between Lovewood Drive and Gallatin Pike for Richmond Drive. So the process moving forward, we'll go all the way back to the beginning. Both these streets were applied for by residents of the streets. There are 2 cycles per year that we accept applications. After that, we collect data on the applications and do the prioritization matrix that I went over earlier, comparing speeds and volumes and all the other things we put into our matrix to select those 85 streets that we were able to do for this cycle. Currently, we are in the neighborhood meeting, which is the first neighborhood meeting we're able to present our concepts to the neighborhood to get your feedback on what we are presenting, what you want to see, and how we can slow down these vehicles on your street. The next thing we'll do is go into our full design based on the comments we get from this meeting. We'll go through and actually place the cushions perfectly where we want them. We'll do our engineering design, making sure we're not on any slopes or in any curves, and we're satisfying all of the warrants that we have to make sure the design is engineered and sound. After that, we can go straight to an online ballot where we will have the final designs posted online with a ballot where you can vote on them. If there is something that comes up during this meeting where you want to come back and see the design after it's been perfectly cleaned up and tweaked and put together, we can have a second meeting that does add about a month to the timeline. So it's faster to go straight to the ballot, but if there is somebody that wants to see it, if it wants to see it, we can come back and have a second meeting. But the online balloting process is a 6-week window, so about two months total for that online balloting process. And then we go to construction. And like your council member said, we had some issues with, not issues, we've had some backlog that has grown with contractors and with materials and a bunch of different things, especially with the recent pandemic that we went through that has elongated that construction timeline. So you're looking at 2 months for us to finalize the design based on the concepts we have now. Another 2 months for the ballot. That's 2 weeks to get the ballots to you, plus 6 weeks to vote. And then assuming a favorable vote, we're looking currently, the process is about 8 to 10 months for us to get the materials, get them to a contractor and get them scheduled and installed. We are currently actively trying to reduce that down. And then, like I said, we could have a second meeting if somebody wants to see the design after it's been completely finalized. But if y'all are good with the concept, we can go straight to that ballot and cut out that extra month.
Harrison, if I could touch base quickly on that second meeting. We oftentimes have a second meeting when we have low participation as well. There's a great crowd of folks who are on this call. Thank you again so much for joining us today. Typically, when we have this level of participation, we can skip that second meeting. But as Harrison said, if you guys want it, we will have it.
Perfect. Thank you, council member. Yes, our process is if somebody wants it, we will have it. But if nobody is opposed to going straight to the ballot, it is faster to go ahead and get you in the queue. We do have a lot of people or a lot of streets that are in this selection period, so that does let you jump ahead of them because your ballot would be first. So it is definitely faster to not have the second meeting. So going on to the balloting process, the balloting is very similar to the card that y'all received for this meeting. We have an example of it on screen, and every ballot is sent with a unique ID for your house. Voting is open for 6 weeks. There will be a date on the mailer that will say when you can vote by or when you have to vote by, and you can respond yes or no. In order for a ballot to pass, we need 66% of the respondents to vote yes. So that is 66% of people that vote. It's not 66% of people that live on the street. And then for who actually gets to vote, it's people that actually have frontage on the street. It's any residential property, church, or school gets one vote, but it is only people that actually live on the street. If you own multiple properties, say you have a rental beside you that you own, you only get one vote because you have one owner or one owner on the street. Vacant properties are ineligible for voting, and businesses are also ineligible. All right. And then we're showing the ballot zone. So this is for McAlpine, both sections of McAlpine. And then I'll also show the ballot zone here for Richmond. So once again, it's for all the properties that actually have frontage on these two streets. Hello, hello, Maggie. I see you have a question in the chat. I'll go back and go over those. So that was our presentation. I know we went through it kind of quickly. We're happy to take any questions. I know Maggie had one on McAlpine Avenue, so I'll go back to the McAlpine Avenue design so she can see it. So this is the design from Gallatin Ave to Gallatin Pike to Kennedy Ave. There are 6 cushions proposed, once again, at that roughly 500-foot spacing. Are there any other questions? Feel free to put them in the chat or just unmute and you can ask.
Hey, yes, just had a quick question for you. Sorry, can you hear me okay? I just want to make sure my headset was working.
Absolutely.
Okay, great, thanks. So one of the issues on McAlpine is that we have a lot of construction vehicles from a company that is on our street. And I just wanted to know kind of what your findings have been. I can see with cars, the cushion's working pretty well, but with large construction vehicles, is this something that you found is effective with such large vehicles as well?
So that's a great question. I don't have any hard data on how it affects construction vehicles versus regular vehicles. You're still going to have to go over the cushion, and no matter what vehicle you're going over, so you still will have basically that unpleasantness if you go over it quickly, no matter what vehicle you're in. There are gaps in the speed cushions, and that is for emergency vehicles. So if you have construction vehicles that have a wider wheelbase, they probably be affected less than like a sedan. And that, once again, is for emergency vehicles, fire trucks, and ambulances to make sure, if there is a fire or an accident somewhere, those vehicles can get there and not be as impeded. But they do work really well for the smaller wheelbase vehicles, and even like work trucks, like your standard F-150 or whatever. Those still have to go over them, and it's not as comfortable as you would like to be going at a high speed. I drive a decently big SUV, and I really have to slow down for it not to give me a little bit of a bump. So, but it's comfortable at that safe, slower speed, but at the higher speeds, it's still, no matter what vehicle you're in, you're still going to notice.
Thanks. Yeah, they're mostly driving, company vehicles, and there's at least 30 per day, if not more. And so that's why I was just curious, kind of how that would impact them, especially since they're up and down the street multiple times a day. Yeah, was just curious about that. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that leads me to think about Harrison. Is it possible? There's 2 things I'd like to see in the final design. One, where there's room around the speed cushions where occasionally people will try to go onto the shoulder to go around them. I want to make sure that we put some bollards in there so that people, if there is a wider spot on the pavement where people might want to do that, oftentimes we'll put bollards in those areas. And then the second thing is I'd like you to review that when you engineer this, potentially putting 1 or 2 speed tables on it. That is a large construction company that has not just company vehicles, but actually commercial vehicles. So big trucks, box trucks, or flatbeds that drive down the street. And so I'm certain that their wheelbase isn't as wide as an ambulance or fire truck. So I don't think they could straddle them. But I'd like to, potentially look and see if we could do a speed table at least in 1 or 2 of these. And that property, I believe, is all the way at the end, or well, it's almost to the end of Kennedy, if I recall. Tiff, is that the right location?
It is just past Kennedy, so not on the first half of McAlpine. They are on just past it, right by Adine and McAlpine is where their intersection is. So by the time they cross Kennedy, they're clear to basically go whatever speed they want from then on to Gallatin. So.
Yeah, Harrison, I think my ask then would be at least 1 speed table on the front half of McAlpine, and then probably 1 maybe right there before Murray Place, wherever that location gets finalized. I'd like you to at least see if that's a possibility there. So 2 to 3 speed tables in addition to the speed humps.
Absolutely. So go back through both of your comments. For the first comment, we do look at every single location when we put together the final design for the speed cushions. And one of the main things we consider is people trying to drive around the speed cushions. So we constantly have to add either a vertical delineator or a sign or something of that nature, or even go to a larger configuration of cushions to make sure that that's not possible for people to go around them into people's yards or whatever it is. So that is definitely something we look at every time. So we will definitely, if we feel it's warranted to add a vertical delineator or a sign or something of that nature, we can definitely add it. And then as far as the speed table goes, that is a great suggestion. That's one of the great things about having these meetings is the background knowledge of the people that live on these streets. So happy to look at doing that, and I'll bring it back to our team of engineers, and we can talk about the best way to handle that as far as adding in a couple tables. So I'll definitely add that to one of the notes that we have when we're going through the final design.
Thank you. And I see Jonathan asked a question. I want to make sure, Jonathan, would you be able to unmute and ask that question? I want to make sure that I understand. Is it the loud air compression brake that you're talking about? The some folks call it a rake brake.
I was just curious about that, and like a lot of the school buses, I'm totally in favor of slowing this traffic down. But I was just curious, since on Richmond Drive, there's a lot of school buses that go back and forth, so I just didn't know how that affects the noise.
Absolutely. So going back to that that spacing, that 500 feet, that allows them to go at a safe, smooth speed across the cushions. If you have them spaced larger than the 500 feet, then you can really accelerate and slow down, accelerate and slow down, and that's when you would probably hear the braking. If you keep them at that spacing, typically you're not able to accelerate in that time frame up to a fast enough speed that you have to slam on your brakes to go over the next set of cushions. So that's trying to keep that speed pretty consistent as you go over the cushions, where you're not able to get up to enough speed to really have to slam on your brakes.
And that's true for like the school buses too.
That is correct. You'd really have to gun it with a school bus to get up to a speed that you'd have to slam on your brakes in 500 feet.
Right.
That's basically one city block.
Right. Okay. Makes perfect sense. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. That's a great question. Is there any other questions or comments from the community on either street?
Hi, I also have a question about McAlpine. One of the issues that we have here is that around the side of the street, there are relatively deep drainage ditches, and they make it quite challenging to walk unless you're walking directly on the road. And so I was wondering whether the option of narrowing the lanes you described earlier was at all on the table, because it would make walking on the street substantially more safe. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'll go back to the data for McAlpine. So McAlpine is 21 to 23 feet wide, which is pretty narrow for a street. Typically for a residential street, you want about 10 feet per lane, and with 2 lanes, so you're looking at about 20 feet is really as narrow as you could go. So there's not much benefit from a traffic calming standpoint trying to narrow it much less than what it currently is. It's just not wide enough for us to stripe off like a walking path. However, I can say with the traffic calming program, the cars will be going slower on the street, so it'll be a lot safer for pedestrians that are using the street facility. In addition, that is one of the criteria that we use for selecting these streets is the lack of sidewalks. So the other way to say that would be the higher chance of a pedestrian being in the street, because we want to make sure that if there is a conflict between a vehicle and a pedestrian, that it is at a safer speed so everybody can walk away safely. So this project will make it better for pedestrians, but we don't have enough room to really stripe off like a walking path.
Okay, thank you.
I will say Hub Nashville is a great resource if you want to request sidewalks along the street. You're happy to make a request through the hub, and you can also talk with your council member as well, to see if that can get put in the queue. That is another program of NDOT, is adding sidewalks.
Thanks, Harrison. We've looked at those around here. This is one of the streets that unfortunately probably would, anyway, we have a lot of needs for sidewalks in the area for sure. The streets in North Englewood are much more suburban than in some of the areas of the district and of the city. So I've tried to set the expectation that sidewalks are a real long shot for us. It is always front of mind, and I know it's on this mayor's mind as well. So just to set the right expectation with everybody on the call, I don't foresee sidewalks happening even if you request them, but by all means request them because that does help us see the demand.
Absolutely, council member. I've done some work with the sidewalk program with NDOT, seeing these requests. There is a very high demand for sidewalks all across Davidson County, and there's that long queue. And unfortunately, there's a limited amount of funds that we can spend on sidewalks. But the more requests you have, the more chance you have of jumping up that queue. So
part of the reason why this program is so popular is because of the pedestrians that we have, especially around schools like Dan Mills and the feeder streets that go to Dan Mills. And so I've done, I've helped walk parents and kids to school in that area. And as much as we can take the lane, that's a great way to do it. It's almost like the neighborhood becoming a pedestrian bus, if you will. And with speed humps, it's a much less cost. It's a more cost-effective way to make things better, safer for pedestrians. It's certainly not the ideal, but it is a significant help. But I think going back to Lucy, your question about the striping, I know we've gone down a rabbit hole here on sidewalks, but I think the striping is a good idea as well. So Harrison, thanks for your feedback on that.
yeah, absolutely. And we'll definitely look and see if there is a little bit of room that we can squeeze. Trying to make a little bit safer for people to walk. But with the street being as narrow as it is, I can't promise that we can really narrow it by much more than what's already there. Awesome. These are fantastic questions. Anybody else have anything on McAlpine or Richmond? We haven't gotten one on Richmond yet. I'm going back to the concepts.
I'm going to make the assumption that since I'm not hearing much negativity, that this is something that folks on the call support. Certainly we'll go through the balloting process with the final design, but I'm picking up that there might not be a need, again, based on the participation, and I'm not hearing pushback from folks. If I'm wrong, direct message me in the chat or reach out to me. I'll put my cell phone number. I think you guys should all have it, but if not, I'm going to put my contact information in the chat. I want to hear from you. If you're against this, I want to hear from you. If you're for it, I want to hear from you. I'm for it, and I'm going to do everything I can to fight for it. If for some reason we are getting negative responses throughout this during the balloting process, I check in at about the 4-week mark and find out what the responses are looking like. And if things are looking negative, I'm going to be in touch with the neighborhood and say, I want this. You want this. You've told me you want this. It qualifies for this program. Let's get it done. I'm actually a fan of saying, if this has been applied for and the data tells us that they're needed, I don't mean any offense to anybody in the public, but if the data says these are needed, we need to put them in. I don't like to ask permission for this. That's the requirement of the program today. But I'm a fan of saying, you guys have told me you want it. The data demonstrates that it's needed. Let's just move forward with it. So we'll go through that process. Certainly, if you have concerns about this and if you're against it, I do want to hear from you. I want to understand what those concerns are. So please contact me. I'm going to go ahead and put my information in the chat right now.
Perfect. Thank you, council member. So assuming that we don't have any more questions, and I don't think we've had any, we don't have any more, but if we do, I'm happy to answer them.
Harrison, I
If
had
you have
one.
any, absolutely, come on.
It's regarding, I know you said you're spacing these things 500 feet apart. Are you sensitive to people's driveways?
Yes, absolutely. We have criteria in the program that we are not allowed to put the cushions in front of a driveway. There is a minimum space from the edge of the driveway that we're allowed to put the cushions as part of our program guidelines that we have on the engineering side.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I say 500 that's more of a rounded number. It's between 450 and 500-ish, 400 and 500-ish, depending on how the street lays out. There are obviously things that affect the cushion locations like curves, hills, driveway locations, intersections, that sort of thing. So it's a rough 500, but that's kind of the goal, is just on the underside of 500.
I see a comment in the chat in regards to budget breaks there at Richmond. And if I did not know that they use Richmond for testing breaks, I will be in touch with them. I live one street over. I'm 2 houses in from Haysboro. I will walk there and or drive there, and I will talk with them and let them know they need not be using that, especially with the speed humps where they'll be testing brakes, it sounds like. I need them to not do that. This is a residential neighborhood, not commercial. So I'll be in touch with them.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you, Councilwoman. And also, while you're talking to them, they put a lot of trash out for the rain to just wash it all down into that little valley right there. So we get a lot of auto related junk coming down through there.
Thank you for that information. And if you ever have info like that, please do alert me to it. I will be in touch with them in the morning.
Perfect. Thank you, Councilmember. That's something that's a little bit outside of our program, but that is definitely something that falls in your court. So thank you for helping partner with us on this and taking care of issues like that. So if you have any other questions, and you can think of them now, happy to answer them while we're still on the call. If they come up over the next couple of weeks, feel free to email them to NDOT TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov, or you can send them to me personally at harrison.turner@kimley-horn.com. Those are both on screen right now, or you can always send them to your council member, and we'll be coordinating as this project moves forward as well. I'm assuming that's okay with you, Councilmember Benedict.
That's correct.
Perfect. If anybody has any last questions, happy to answer them now. If not, based on this group not having any qualms with going forward to straight to ballot with the concept design, we'll go ahead and wrap up our design over the next couple months, really fine tune everything, and then send this out to ballot. So expect to see a ballot in your mailbox in the next couple months.
Thanks, Harrison. And thank you again, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you all for being here.